Hello everybody, my name is Tuppence and this week I'm continuing my Christmas makes and I'm going to make another Christmas ornament. I'm going to be using these shaker moulds. I did use them a couple of weeks ago to make a monogram gift tag, but I'm not using these as shakers this time. I'm going to be using the reverse of the mould so that I actually get individual letters. And I'm going to combine that with this mould, and I just want to use this ring in the middle. I'm going to be using UV resin. You could totally do these with epoxy, but they're very small moulds and they're not going to take up that much resin. So for the sake of speed, I'm going to use craft UV resin and some glitters, and I've also got a glittered mica Dazzling diamonds from Meyspring. So I'm going to use 3 of these moulds, and I've got the J, the O and the Y, so that obviously that is going to be Joy. And the first thing I need to do is add a little bit of UV resin to this cup. And I'm going to keep it clear. I'm going to be using 3 different colours of glitters, 1 for each letter. So I'll add the glitters to the moulds rather than use 3 different cups. I'm going to use my heat gun to warm this up, make it a little bit more fluid and get rid of any bubbles. I'm just going to move these out of the way. You know, you really can't see these very well. Let me see if I can get a darker matte first. Okay, I think everything shows up a little bit better on there. So I'm going to use the heat gun to warm this up, and this is going to make it more fluid. The craft UV resin is already a low viscosity, but it is still a little chilly here, and I want to make this even more fluid and get rid of any bubbles. And you can see just how liquid that's become. All right, let me just pop that over to the side, and then I can give this a quick stir around and mix that heat through evenly. And that is nice and liquid, and I should be able to pour that a little bit more easily into the thin space of the mould. So I'm only going to fill this about halfway. Okay, and I'll do all of them at the same time because I'm going to add the glitters to the mould rather than to the UV resin. All right, last one. And this is much easier to pour now. Okay, so each one's got about halfway up, and I'm going to add the red glitter to the J. I'm using a chunky hex glitter. It's got ultra fine and round pieces, hexagonal pieces, really pretty glitter. Tap off the excess, and then I can put my lid back on. I'm going to add the gold to the O. Just going to clean that little spoon off onto the back of my glove, and then I'm not going to contaminate the colours. So I spoon a little bit of gold into here. I was so happy when I thought about doing this. I really love these moulds. I mean, I like them as a shaker, but to know that I can actually use them as an alphabet as well was going to make them even more useful. And they're a really nice size, probably about an inch and a quarter maybe. Alright, so I'm going to put the blue into the Y. I'll try and get it into the resin and not on the side of the mould. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. I'm loving the colours, and I'm just going to take the microbrush stick, give it a little bit of a stir. I don't want it all to sink, but I do want to make sure that it lays flat, covering the surface of the resin. That's looking good. Might need to put a little bit more in there. I think I've got quite a lot in the Y, so I am going to add a little bit more to the O. And I've definitely got the glitter on that mould there. Let's just push that in with a stick. That's looking much better, nice and colourful. In fact, I'm going to add a little bit more into that red as well, just to even out the colour. That looks better, a lot more even. So I'm just going to move that around again with my stick, and then I'll pop these underneath my dual-sided lamp to cure for 5 minutes. Now I'm going to top up the mould with clear resin and dome it slightly, and they can go back underneath the lamp to cure for another 5 minutes. Okay, I can demould these now. And they pop out quite easily, and you can see that they're a little bit matte on the back, so you can always just add a little bit of resin on top of that if you want, but I'm not bothered. I do have a little bit of overpour, so I'm just going to sand that off. There you go. And there is my first letter. So I can demould the others. And that one's got a little bit of overpour just on the inside. Let me just grab my deburring tool. It's a very thin little bit of resin that's sat on top of the mould. So I'll just scrape that off. And a little bit on the outside as well. Alright, there we go. So there's my J and my O, and the Y looks fine, nothing to do with that. Alright, so there are my letters, and now I need to create the ring that they are going to sit in. So I have this mould. It is meant for, well, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I think it has little houses that sit over these grooves, but it's pretty tight, and I've got something down in the bottom of that. Let me just hook that out. It's a little bit of resin, I think. So again, I'm going to use some UV resin for this. I'm not filling up the mould completely. I just want a very shallow bit at the bottom of the ring. And I'm only going to be using that centre ring to, well, the middle ring, not the centre ring. Right, so I've put a little bit of UV resin in there. And again, I'm going to heat this up because that is a really tight space that I need to get this down into. That should be enough. I'm going to add that Dazzling diamond glitter that I showed you. It's a glitter mica. So I'm going to put a scoop in there. That should be enough. And then I can give that a good mix. This is beautiful stuff. And you don't need a lot of it. So let me stir that around. Okay, now I can add this to the middle ring. It's a little bit tight, so I'm going to pull the mould apart slightly, and then I'll just trickle it down. It is going to hit the sides. As the stream is flowing down, it's being deflected by static, and it will cling to the side of the mould. I'll deal with that in a minute. I'm going to use my heat gun to make it a little bit more fluid so it will run down the sides. But I only want to use what I've got in this cup. I think that's probably going to be enough. It's not very wide. I would say it was about 6mm maybe. And I don't need it to be very deep. I just want to create a ring. I'm going to heat it up now, and then that should make it a little bit more liquid so it will flow around the bottom, and it will melt any of the bits that are on the side, cause them to become more fluid, and then they'll flow down into the bottom as well. Alright, let me heat up what is left in my cup. And then I can trickle that down the side as well. I'm just going to scrape out everything I've got in there. Okay. And then another quick blast with the heat gun. And it's already filling the bottom now, so that's great. I'm just trying to get anything that's on the sides to run down. Okay, I'm going to leave this to cool down now before I pop this underneath my dual side lamp for 5 minutes. Okay, that has finished curing, and I've let it cool down a little bit before I'm attempting to demould this. So I'm just going to take this out of the mould. And I did try to use a bangle for this, but the bangle moulds that I have, it was just too small, and I couldn't fit my letters in. So this was what I found was perfect. So I'm going to place my letters in the middle, and I'm going to fix the Y and the J to the outer ring, and then I will fix between the Y and the O and the J and the O with a couple of snowflakes. So I do need to make those, but before I do that, I want to drill a hole in the top of the ring. So I've got one of the little electric drills, files. It's a USB chargeable one. I'm just going to use that to start a pilot hole in the top, and then I can put an eye hook in there. Drilling the hole just makes it a little bit easier to attach that hook, and it lessens the risk of me cracking that resin, especially when it's such a small area when I try to screw that in. Okay, so that is now done. I'm going to pop all of these off to one side, and I need to create the snowflakes that are going to join the letters. So I've got my mould. I'm going to add my resin to the cup, and then I'm going to heat that up again and make it a little bit more fluid. Then I can add a little bit of the Dazzling Diamonds glitter mica and make sure that that is well stirred in. Now, because these moulds are very small, I'm going to add this to a needle nose bottle, and that should help me fill the moulds a little easier. So I'm going to fill up the bottle with the resin that I've just mixed up. And it is still a little bit thick. It is pouring in there, but I'm just going to heat this up, and then that should flow in there a little more easily. And I'm only going to mix up a little bit at a time. I don't want the resin to end up curing in this bottle. If I had a black bottle, that would be easier because it would block the light, but I don't. So I'm going to make do with what I have. Now that should make it much easier to pipe this into the moulds. The needle gets into all of those tiny cavities, and I can make sure that it's all filled up. And the mica seems to be flowing through the little needle. It's not blocking up that needle. So let me zoom in and you can see what I'm doing. There we go. I can get into all of the little branches and fill them up. So I'm going to carry on filling these up. I'll pop a bit of music on. Okay, now I have all the pieces that I need to assemble, so I'm going to put the eye hook in first. I'm just going to hold that between a pair of pliers. Whoops, I've pinched my glove in that. And then if I can find where I drilled the hole, I can start to screw that in. So I'm just going to turn that ring around and get that seated in. So I haven't drilled all the way through, and I don't want this to go all the way through. So I'm going to stop there. Alright, so there is my hook in place. So now I know which is going to be the top of my ring. So I just want to make sure that is straight so I can lay it flat. And then I can use this UV bonding gel to put my letters in place. So the J is going to go here. And this mat is a little bit bouncy. It's not also straight and flat. So I'm going to move these onto my silicone pad on my desk, which is a little bit firmer. And I can build that in place. So let's start again. I want the J there. I'm going to put a little bit of the gel on the curve of that J. And then, butterfingers. Then I can put that in place. Make sure that it is touching the edge of that ring. And then I'll use the torch that comes with that UV bonding gel and cure this. It takes about 10 to 15 seconds. So I'm just going to lift that up. It is already attached, and cure that from the back as well. Okay, so that is one. Now I can attach the Y on the other side. And again, just make sure that it touches the outer ring and try and get it lined up with the top of the J as well. Put a little bit of the resin on the top. Just make sure that that is straight too. Okay. And then I can cure that. And again, I'm going to cure it from the front and the back. Clean my mat a little bit. Now I can put the O in the middle. Now obviously that's not touching either of the other letters, so this is where the snowflakes are going to come in, and I'm going to use those to bridge the gap and to join the letters together. So I'll put a little bit on top of that J and on the O, and then I can place the snowflake over the top, and that's going to join that O in place. Just get it lined up and cure it again. I'm going to do the same on the other side to bridge the gap between the O and the Y, and then I'll carry on adding some snowflakes randomly around. So again, I'm going to put on some music and I'll speed this up a little bit. Okay, the letters are all joined now and it's looking pretty good, but I think I'm going to add a few more snowflakes. So I've made a couple of bigger ones and I'm just going to add that at the top of the, just kind of fill in that gap above the letters. So I'm going to put it just on the O and the Y at the top. Got a little bit too much resin on there, so I'm just spreading that out. And then I can pop that here on the top, and that's just going to plug that gap at the top. It was a little bit too much open space there. So again, just cure this. I think I've cured my glove. Nope, that's fine. Thought I'd stuck my glove in place. Alright, this is pretty much it. I'm going to make another one, a duplicate one, and then I'm going to hang these in my window. Well, it's not the easiest thing to photograph, but here they are in my window. I hope you've liked this video. If you have, please give me a thumbs up, comment, share, subscribe if you could, and you'll be able to come back and see what I'm going to make next time. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye.